Hi and welcome to Blue Shift Aviation, where the open skies are closer than you think. So I'm a flight simmer and an aviation enthusiast that loves sharing what works for me. So I've learned a lot of lessons along the way, and hopefully these tutorials will jumpstart your journey into flight simming. When I started flying sims, I got super frustrated with using the on-screen buttons and dials to program in my waypoints into my GPS. So I came up with a system where I use free software online to actually plan my flight and then export it to a file which I could then upload into my Garmin GPS. So we're going to talk about that today and kind of go through that process that works for me. There's other ways to do it. There's 1,000 different ways to do it, but this is what works for me, and I think that it's actually pretty easy once you get it in your mind how it's done. Sounds super complicated, right? But actually it only takes a couple of minutes, which has saved me endless frustration fiddling with those dials and menu commands. So it lets me get to what I actually want to do in a flight sim, which is take off and hit the open skies. Now please remember, this is only for fun, so never actually file your flight plan, because in programs like SkyVector you do actually have an opportunity to file your flight plan. Realize that a site like SkyVector is an actual aviation site. And so these are sites that are there for actual pilots, not just flight simmers. Flight simmers use it. It's a great tool, but it's actually not what it was designed for. So SkyVector does allow you to export a standard format that's used by real-life Garmin units, but unfortunately it's not readable by X-Plane, which is what I fly. I also fly Microsoft Flight Simulator X, so we need to convert that into something that those programs can read. Now, since I primarily fly X-Plane, that's what we're going to focus on today. I do use a popular Visual Basic script, which I downloaded from xplane.org, and I'll list that in the description below. Now, realize that this is a computer script, and a lot of antivirus programs really do not like running scripts. So you may need to make an exception in your antivirus software to allow this to run, but your mileage may vary, and you do need to do some homework on whether or not this is safe to run in your environment. So I'm not an actual pilot, so please don't take anything I say as gospel truth when generating routes and getting them into your GPS. I'm sure there's plenty of actual pilots who have YouTube channels that can give you the lowdown, real deal tutorial on how they develop a plan, but this is what works for me in the sim environment. So like I said earlier, I use a free online program called SkyVector. SkyVector is a program used by actual pilots, and what you're looking at here is an actual plate, an aeronautical plate, that they would use to plan a route and see what landmarks are and all kinds of information when they're actually up in the air. So we're going to plan a little trip today. I planned on leaving from Ogden, Utah, which is my home base, at the Ogden-Hinckley Airport. We're going to plan a little trip up to West Yellowstone so that I could see some bears and some bison. With coronavirus going on right now, you kind of have to take little virtual trips since actual trips are kind of frowned upon. So we're going to go up to West Yellowstone today. So once you're on SkyVector and logged into a free account that you can create, you click on the flight plan, which is just below their logo in the upper left side. This opens the flight planning dialog. I first start looking at my planned route. Now, SkyVector uses actual aviation plates to show you elevations, airports, navigation aids, and a lot more. I usually focus on mountains because for me here in Utah, planning a flight in a Cessna 172 means I need to put a little bit of thought into where my flight path is going to take me. So I love the Cessna. Cessnas are awesome planes, but they do struggle getting to altitude quickly, and so I usually plan a route that gets me around mountains rather than over them. Besides, it's the journey, not the destination, right? So why not see all those landmarks along the way that you might see in a car driving in the same direction? So for this flight, I'm going to take a leisurely trip from Ogden-Hinckley Airport, vectoring along the Wasatch Mountains to Brigham City, which is right here. And then I'm going to pop up to Malad, Idaho, which is right here. And then I'm probably going to make a trip over to Pocatello, which is right here. And then it's pretty much a straight shot, if we zoom out a little bit, pretty much a straight shot up here to West Yellowstone. Now if I track along that route I've planned, I can see that I'm going to avoid the mountains to the east nicely, with only a few peaks north of Malad to really worry about. But by that time, I should be at the top of my climb, which today will be 11,000 feet. And looking at the highest altitudes in each section of my plan, I can see that I don't hit the 11,000 foot obstacles until I get almost to West Yellowstone, and this should give me a really nice view along the way. So how do you determine on an aviation map kind of what those high points are along your path? The map is segregated into these squares, these grids. And you can see that there is an altitude marked in each one of these grids, and it's in a different location in each grid. So if you look at this grid, it looks like 10,700 feet is the highest point in this grid, and that's where it's going to be at. If I look up here to where our destination is today, West Yellowstone, we're going to be 11,700 feet, but that peak is actually in this area over here. It's not going to be where we're actually going to be flying in today, so I don't necessarily need to worry about that. Now if we come along my planned route, back down to Pocatello, back down to Malad, over to Brigham City, you can see really we don't have anything to worry about too much. 10,400 feet as we leave Ogden, but those are the mountains to the east that we're going to avoid by flying along Interstate 15 and coming up to Brigham City as our first waypoint. So in order to put our flight plan into SkyVector, let's put in our departure airport and the next airport on our route, which is KMBC, or Brigham City, Utah. From here, SkyVector makes it super easy to just click the next point along the way, select the target you're looking for from a list of options, then adding it to the plan. So let's do that for Malad, Pocatello, and finally West Yellowstone. So we'll zoom in a little bit here. Whoops, other way. Okay, and you can see that we have a VOR, which is a navigation aid, directly to the northwest-ish from Ogden-Hinckley Airport, which is right here. So I'm actually going to right-click on that, and you can see we've got that VOR. I'm going to go ahead and add that to my plan, and if you look in the upper left-hand corner, that then lists Ogden as our first stop. Now, as we scroll up, we're going to come up to Brigham City Regional, BMC. We're going to right-click on that, and you can see we have Brigham City Regional. We're going to add that to our plan. And then we're going to come up to Malad. Now I should be at altitude once I get up to Malad, so I'm actually going to use the VOR in Malad. You could use the airport itself. In fact, let's go ahead and click on that. And you can see we've got Malad City, KMLD, or we can add that VOR, which again is a navigation aid. I'm going to go ahead and click on the VOR. Now you can see there's this line here. Now that line is our flight plan to this point. Now as we go from Malad, we're going to pop up to Pocatello. I'm going to click on that, add that to our plan, and then finally we're going to track past Idaho Falls and end up in West Yellowstone, Montana. So let's go ahead and make that our destination. Now one thing I did forget to do is put in our departure airport here. I could actually type that in. So that's KOGD. And so now you can see our completed flight plan on our map, and it is ready to be exported. Now before we export it, let's take a look at a couple of things that SkyVector would provide to an actual pilot. So if we look up here, we've got the briefing and filing. In order to do that, you have to put in some information about your aircraft, the tail number, some other things. And remember, this is a flight sim. Do not move forward with briefing and filing unless you are an actual pilot. So what we're going to do today, I found that this navlog is actually kind of fun. So if you click on Navlog, it will give you the information that you just created. So we're leaving from KOGD, which is Ogden, Utah. We're going to hit that first VOR, which then ties us nicely up to Brigham City. We're going to hit that Malad VOR, and then let's see, Pocatello, and then we're going to end up in West Yellowstone. Now, if you look, they've given you some really interesting information over here. Now, this information is based on something we haven't actually input yet, which is our airspeed and our altitude. So the default altitude is 8,000 feet. I don't know if that's going to be tall enough because we are going to be passing over the mountains in Malad, and I think those are coming right up on 8,000 feet. So I'm going to want to give myself a little bit of latitude there, probably make my altitude closer to 11,000 feet, because we know that at the end of our flight up into West Yellowstone, we're going to be 10,000, 10,500. Once we start dropping into West Yellowstone, we need to be at about 9,000 feet in order to hit the ILS approach, which is an instrument landing approach. So we're going to need to adjust this a little bit. But it also gives us our true airspeed. It's going to give us, based on actual real-world data, it's going to give us some temperatures we can expect along that track at different altitudes, wind directions. So this is kind of interesting information. And if you really like to put a little bit of realism into your simming experience, you could print this out. You can make notes on it. If you're using ATC, they're going to give you a squawk code. You can go ahead and put that in there. Your squawk code is basically just a transponder on your plane that tells them who you are as you're flying around. And then there's some other little things that you could put in up here as well. So, kind of fun. I'm going to leave my airspeed at 110. That seems to be a comfortable speed for the Cessna 172. But I am going to change my altitude to 11,000 feet. Now I'm going to put in 11,000, and I'm going to show you what SkyVector does. If I hit enter, it changes that to what your actual airspeed would be if you were a pilot. So that's 1,000 feet instead of 11,000 feet. And so that's the altitude we're going to try to get to, probably not by the time we get to Brigham City, but definitely by the time we get to Malad, we should be close to 11,000 feet. And then we'll use that as our cruise altitude as we come along our track. And then, when we get about, 30, 40 miles out, I'll start doing a descent. And we want to hit that 9,000 feet by the time we're about 5 or 6 miles out from the airport in order to catch that ILS beacon on the other end. All right, now that we've got our flight plan in place, we can go ahead and work on exporting that so that we can convert it and then upload it into our Garmin GPS unit in the Cessna 172. So if you come up here to the top of the flight plan, you've got several options. So the one thing that I don't like about SkyVector is it doesn't seem that I can go back and edit it once I have actually put in my flight plan, or at least not edit it very easily. And so I'll typically just start over with a flight plan. If it's a short one like this one, it's not that hard. It's going to take me 30 seconds. I'm going to put it back in. But if you click on this blank sheet of paper up here, that's going to give you a brand new flight plan. You can open saved flight plans. You can save this flight plan. But we want to focus on this button here, which is we're going to send the flight plan to something else. You're going to have all of these platforms that actual pilots use on their iPads, their devices. We're going to use the FPL option. So if we click on the FPL option, we have an option to either email it to ourselves, or we're going to download the Garmin.fpl file, which is what we're going to do. Now, I have a folder on my computer called Flight Plans in Documents. This is where I keep flight plans that I use on a regular basis. So what we're going to do, we've already got kwys.fpl. That's the flight plan I downloaded earlier. So we're going to go ahead and just save over that. And now we have it down at the bottom. Now we're going to close SkyVector for just a minute. All right, now you're going to want to open Windows Explorer on your desktop. I have a folder that we saved that file to called Flight Plans. And so if you look up here, we've got that kwys.fpl flight plan that we just saved. We need to convert that into something that X-Plane can read. And so what we want to do, this is that script I was talking to you about. It's a Visual Basic script. And so we're going to go ahead and start that up. Now I have given my computer permission to open this, and we're going to have an opportunity here to go find that file that we just downloaded. So I'm going to click on kwys.fpl, click open. Now it's going to open up a dialog at the bottom. It says, what do you want to name it? We're going to call it West Yellowstone. Whoops, need an E. Click OK. And now you can see that that is created in the same folder, westyellowstone.fms. Now FMS is a file that can be read by X-Plane, and so that's the file we're now going to load into our GPS. Okay, there is one last step that we need to take, and that is to copy our new .fms file and put it in the location inside of X-Plane where that's actually going to live. So I'm going to copy that flight plan. Now, your computer will have a specific path, and you'll want to look that up. There's plenty of YouTube videos on how to do that, but I'll show you quickly how you find it on my computer. So I have one hard drive that is specifically there for running X-Plane. Nothing else runs on it, and so I call that my Steam drive. So I'm going to go into that, and then there's the Steam folder where all of the program data lives. You're going to go down to Steam Apps, Common, X-Plane 11, and then if you look, we've got all different kinds of things here. That this will be important if you do other things inside of X-Plane, like install aircraft or scenery. We're going to come into the Output folder, and then if you look, you've got FMS plans. This is a folder that's actually created by X-Plane, so we're going to click into that, and you can see I've already got some flight plans that I've done previously. So I'm going to go ahead and paste our new West Yellowstone flight plan in there. Now, that's kind of a path to go through each time, right? So I actually just created a shortcut to that folder and put it on my desktop, and that's called Output. And so if I click on Output, it brings me right here to this main page that we've just found through the long method. But now I can click into my flight plans, and there we go. This is actually where X-Plane puts a lot of its information, and so this is interesting. If you take screenshots within the game, this is where you're going to find those screenshots and those videos and those replays. So this is a very useful folder to have. All right, now we've made the trek across the tarmac out here to our Cessna 172. This is just the default 172 that X-Plane gives with the program when you purchase it. I think it's a beautiful plane. It's very simple. It's easy to fly. It's easy to land. It can take a lot of abuse, but it's a lot of fun. And so I really enjoy flying this plane, and I love the level of detail that Laminar Research has put into this. I mean, I think the graphics are very detailed. This is really a lot of fun to fly. There are other planes out there, other versions of this that you can pay for, but for now at least I feel like this is a fantastic plane to just fly around and have fun. So let's go ahead and jump into the cockpit. All right, now that we're in our Cessna 172, you can see this is just the standard analog layout. Nothing fancy here, nothing's changed. It isn't what we call a glass cockpit because all of the dials are actual analog dials, but we do have some cool electronics in here as well in what we call the aviation stack, or the avionics stack, excuse me, and that's over here with the GPS. Let's go ahead and zoom in on that now. So the avionics are going to consist of your GPS. You've got some communication gear up here. You've got your transponder. Looks like a car stereo from my Trans Am back in the day. But what this is this is actually that squawk code we talked about. When you take off, air traffic control will give you a squawk code, and that's basically what you tune your radio to, and that tells them who you are. So squawk 4702 is going to identify my tail number as 4702, and that's going to be how they figure out who I am in the air. Now, if we come down to the bottom, we've got the S-Tech Autopilot. We're not going to cover that in this video, but that's actually what you use to control what we're going to be inputting into the GPS today. When we turn on nav, it's going to use the information that's up here in the GPS, and that's what's going to actually fly our plane. We've got altitude, vertical speed, approach, heading. There's all kinds of fun things here. But today we're going to focus on the GPS. So if you come up here to the GPS, this is what would always frustrate me, is these little dials. You know, clicking on this and doing the thing, and my mouse would come off of it as I'm clicking multiple times, and so that's why I came up with this process of using SkyVector. Now, on the default screen, you're going to see you've got a nice overview of where you are in relation to the airport, what's around you. You've got some bearing information here. It's going to tell you your ground speed. It's also going to tell you what this screen is showing you. This is showing me basically 35 nautical miles across. So I can change the range on this. You can see it changes to 15 nautical miles, 10 nautical miles as we zoom in. And it actually puts you very close to where you actually are physically, geographically. And you know, if you're going to look at a flight plan in its entirety, you're going to zoom out. This goes out quite a ways. A couple hundred miles, 300, 500 miles. I think 500. Nope, 1,000 miles. So you can actually get a lot of detail just by zooming in and out. Now what we're going to focus on today is the flight plan. And so that flight plan is controlled by this button right here, FPL. Go ahead and click on that. Now you can see we've got a flight plan in here already. Now since I'm going to show you how to do this today, we don't need that flight plan. And so what we're going to want to do is come up to menu. We're going to actually, delete this flight plan and start fresh with a new one. So if you've never used your GPS before, this is what you're going to see, just a blank flight plan. Now the GPS will look where you are physically, and it knows that I'm at Ogden Airport, and so that's what it's going to put in as our departure airport, is KOGD. If you come down here to the bottom of the screen, you see this tells you how many pages there are in this particular menu. Since we're on the flight plan menu, FPL, we have two options. We have 2 pages. We're on the first page, which is the actual flight plan. We actually want to come over here to our tricky little button, and we're going to come over to our flight plan catalog. Now you can see WestYellowstone.fms. That's that file that we created and moved over to the X-Plane folder earlier. That's ready to go. I'm going to click the push cursor button, and that's going to highlight the first flight plan in our catalog. I'm going to continue to click the button until I get down to West Yellowstone. Once I get to the West Yellowstone, which is the flight plan we want to file today, I'm going to hit enter, and you can see now we've got this cool line that shows exactly where we're going to be heading today. So if I come back into the flight plan, you can see that all of those waypoints are all nice and lined up and ready to go. Now we're not quite done yet because we need some approach information. Since we are going to West Yellowstone, I do want to have an ILS approach because it is going to be a little bit tricky. There's some mountains around me, and I want to make sure I'm on the right glide slope, and so I'm going to use an ILS approach. And so what I need to do is I actually need to have the GPS program the standard approach. So I'm going to come over to the procedure button, PROC, and you can see it lists our arrival airport, which is West Yellowstone, and it also lists our departure airport, which is KOGD, or Ogden, Utah. But it's also got select approach. And that's the first thing that it's highlighted as you come into this menu. I do want to select an approach, so I'm going to hit enter. And it will give you all of the available approaches at that airport. And so you can see there's runway 1 has 3 different types of approach. And runway 19, which is coming the other way, it's heading south, that's also got 1 type of approach. But since we're coming from the south, we're going to use runway 1. And I do want an ILS approach, which is already highlighted. So I'm going to hit enter. I'm going to use vectors, and I'm going to load it. Now you want to load it so that it's in the flight plan, but you don't want to activate it, because if you activate it, then once you hit the autopilot, it's going to want to start vectoring to get you in line with this runway. If you do that too early, I could be heading out into the west desert of the western United States in order to get lined up with this runway, take me off my flight plan, put me over mountains that I didn't plan on. And so don't activate your approach until you get within a reasonable distance. Usually within maybe 75 miles, I'll activate that approach if there's really nothing around me that's going to cause any difficulty. Because usually if you've planned your flight plan correctly, you're going to be lined up with the runway pretty well already, because you're going to come in on those approaches that line you up with the runway. But activating your approach, that gets you really lined up, and so you don't want to do that until the very end. So I'm going to go ahead and click Load, come back to my flight plan, and you can see my approach is now input and ready to go. Now, I know there's a little bit of work at the front end of this video getting that planned in SkyVector, but I think that's actually a lot of fun. You're going to see the topology of the areas you're going to be flying over. You can plan your route. Maybe you want to see some sights along the way. And then once that's in place, really it's just a matter of downloading that Garmin file to your computer, converting it, and then putting that converted file into the proper folder in X-Plane so that your GPS can read it. Typically, once I get my flight plan in place and download that file, it's about a 1-minute process to get it into the folder, so that once I get in my plane, I can just come here, program that in, and I'm ready to fly. Hopefully this gave you some insight into how the GPS works and a quick and easy way to get that flight plan information from something visual like SkyVector into your GPS with minimal fuss. This has saved me a lot of time. It allows me to get into my plane, get into the air, and then enjoy the flight as I travel to whatever destination that I've chosen. So let's move on to West Yellowstone, and let's look at some of those bears and some of those bison and some of those geysers. Can't wait for my little vacation here.